Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with the esteemed Dr. Eric Lopkin. And really interesting news. I think it just came out today, the census data and how that the implications on our electoral process. First, I'll just throw that out to you first, and then I'm wondering what the reaction is going to be from the Democrats. So let's talk about, or you should talk about the impact on the electoral process.
Yeah, the numbers actually came out on Monday, and what we have seen is a loss of seats in liberal states. New York lost a seat. California lost a seat. Pennsylvania lost a seat. On the other hand, more conservative states, Texas gained 2. Florida gained 2.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me, before you get into the political ramifications, doesn't that speak volumes of people voting with their feet? I mean, I know it's ancient history. 50 years ago, people were flocking to California. Flocking.
Yes, and now that trend is reversed. People are leaving California. Companies are leaving California. States that have decided that businesses are the enemy and have gone, swinging towards the left are losing population. And Illinois is one of those also. They lost a seat. In fact, the only really conservative state that didn't lose was Connecticut, and they actually grew at the 4th slowest rate in the country. And the only thing that kept Connecticut from losing a seat was the vast number of people who moved to Connecticut during the pandemic to escape New York City.
Yes, I would agree. Yes, I would agree with that. But I think it's more than just business, however, Dr. Lopkin. I think it's also the flight of the middle class because they feel alienated, like a state like California, just as an example. You have the poor and the poorest of the poor, and you have the elite. The elites do not get impacted in any way, shape, or form by liberal policies. It's the middle class that are saying, hey, I might have gotten laid off, or I'm, a younger person starting my career. California is not the place to do this. And I think it's also beyond economic or a business perspective. I think it's people are getting sick of whack job policies.
I think it's even more than that. I think it's the actual conditions that these policies are creating. San Francisco, widely considered the most liberal city in the country, also has the worst homeless problem. They actually have had news reports on their local news about the problem of human feces in their streets.
Okay, but one has to beg the question, with the liberal elites, they've gone to the best schools. When do they catch on that maybe, Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over again and expecting different results? Isn't that happening right now? I mean, isn't this the definition of insanity? You've had 20, it's not a year, it's not 4 years, it's 20, 30 years of these policies. And you've gone for instance, for California, you went from the richest state in the union, the land of milk and honey, to the land of U-Haul.
Yeah, I mean, is it insanity? Absolutely. They keep repeating the same things over and over again. When Biden was elected and the Democrats took control of the House and the Senate, Nancy Pelosi introduced the exact same 2 bills that she introduced when Obama won and the Democrats took control of the House and the Senate. And I would point out that despite the Democrats having control of both houses and the White House, they still can't get those bills out of committee because the ideas are so bad.
Mm-hmm. So which 2 ideas are those, real quick? Statehood?
No, they weren't statehood.
It doesn't make a difference.
I'm blanking on what the bills were. We talked about it on an earlier podcast, so our listeners can go back through the archives and find out. But yeah,
Well,
they do the same thing over and over again. And this is actually why the House pushed through the bill to allow Washington, D.C. to become a state, because they desperately need now to bolster their ranks, because their strongholds have lost population.
What's the chances? I mean, God forbid that does happen. I think it's still a long shot, isn't it?
Yeah, the last I heard, they just don't have the votes in the Senate to do it.
People like Manchin and others they're not going to go on. It'll be suicide.
Yeah, centrist Democrats have said that there is no reason for Washington, D.C. to be a state. Washington, D.C. has a population of approximately a little over 700,000 people. That's not a state. That's a city.
And plus, the Constitution is written that it's not a state.
Right. But just to give you an idea of the size of that population, New York's St. Patrick's Day parade has more people than Washington, D.C. does.
Well, Boston has more people.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying the parade, not the city. Same thing in San Francisco. Their gay pride parade has more people than Washington, D.C. has. So it's absolutely ludicrous. If they're concerned about the people of Washington, D.C. not having representation, they should be counted as part of the state of Maryland or the state of Virginia.
Does the Democratic liberal wing, do they counter this census shift with illegal immigrants? That's the only trump card they may have.
Well, illegal immigrants aren't going to help them because the numbers are already in. They can bring people in, but they've already lost the seats. So
okay.
there's
but they can influence the electoral process in a place like Texas, for instance.
They can try, but to be fair, they tried that already with Beto O'Rourke, and we all saw how well that worked.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. We'll see how this plays out. But basically, I mean, if you're a Democrat, don't get too psyched about what happened in the last election, because I think Trump shot himself. I'm sorry, he just did. And he was a highly flawed candidate. His policies, most of them are right on. His behavior was, I'd say, middle school at best. And people got sick of him, and I think so.
Yeah, you're seeing more and more people, if you watch on social media, very few people are defending Biden, even folks that voted for him, because very few people voted for Biden. They voted against Trump.
That's my point.
And now they're not happy with the choice.
Exactly. So they have some cognitive dissonance, buyer's remorse. Real quick, something you mentioned on our live broadcast, Carnivore Radio, about was it Generation Z?
Yep, Gen Z.
How they're actually conservative, and it was the reason why I bring it up, and for you and for our listeners, is that a coworker of mine mentioned that her 3 daughters going to different colleges. One of them's in the South, and the daughter said how young people, students were very much conservative, and she thought that was just indicative of being in the South. But the other 2, they're going to Eastern, more liberal, traditional liberal schools. They also said that most of the students or the majority of students are actually conservative. So why do I bring this up? Because it's very interesting. If you get away from or you get past the millennials, which grew up under Biden, you don't have a progression of another liberal generation coming on board, do you?
No, you don't. The next generation of voters coming in is swinging conservative. And the fact of the matter is, it's partially because they've actually seen the results of these liberal policies, but a big part of it is actually just they are sick and tired of the whining of millennials. The millennials are actually shooting themselves in the foot because they are aggravating other Democrats, other liberals. The millennial generation is actually making themselves pariahs. And in fact, a recent study came out that AOC is the least effective legislature in Congress. Why? Because the millennials aren't interested in actually passing policy. They're interested in making a big deal on social media. So while the millennials made a big noise because they're all over television, they're all over social media, they're actually not getting anything done.
Interesting. Well, very interesting edition of Carnivore Bites. Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Thank our listeners. Unfortunately, we will not be live this Friday. We'll be certainly back with Carnivore Bites and Carnivore Radio next week, won't we, Dr. Lopkin?
Yes, we will, and we'll see you then.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Carnivore Bites, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us every week on carnivoreradio.com, exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast Store, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts.